Welcome to our last mahaba-habang usapan for this year. This is our fourth online conversation brought to you by CNN Philippines in partnership with San Mig Light. Now, throughout this series, we have been focusing on key social issues of our time, from the use of social media, mental health awareness, and the impact of COVID-19 pandemic to the LGBTQ community. Now, today, we are looking at masculinity, particularly the need to detox masculinity. Or to put it another way, how to be a good man. Now, how to beat and change those gender stereotypes? Well, to discuss this and much more, we've got a fantastic panel lined up tonight, but we also, more importantly, want to hear from you. So please do send us your comments and questions so that you too can join the conversation. We're looking forward to hearing from you. Do engage and let us know what's on your mind and be part of this conversation. We're looking forward to all of your entries. Now, let's begin by welcoming our first panelist. Please welcome on board Meta Sarmiento. Now, Meta is a poet, a slam poet, a rapper, an educator, and in a past life, a gang member. Hey, Meta, good evening.
Hello. Good morning from Colorado. How are you
Good morning, I should say. Good morning, I should say. We are all across the world. Thank you for making time to be with us. It's going to be a very exciting discussion that we're going to be having tonight and this morning on your part. But just a little bit more on your background. You know, you were brought up in Guam and you now live in the U.S. And like I said, it's especially great to have you with us, particularly with the time that we got you up this morning. It's pretty early in the morning out there in Colorado. Now, let's set the stage for where you're going to be coming from in terms of this conversation. Meta, what are your first thoughts when you hear the term toxic masculinity?
Yeah, you know, growing up, I think for me, the idea of manhood and masculinity was really shaped by my experiences with other boys in my neighborhood, right? Yeah. And I learned early on that to be a man means to have almost an obsession with violence and over-aggression and destructive behaviors. And early on, that's where my idea of masculinity was rooted in.
And I mean, that's understandable considering really at that point in your life where you were looking for role models and you found it in the brotherhood of the company you kept, your past life as a gang member. You've got some really interesting stories. I want to jump back to that. I like where we're taking off with your side of things and your thoughts on toxic masculinity. Keep that on the table, keep that on the boil, and we're going to discuss all of that with our other panelists. And I would like to bring them in now. Let me bring in our next panelist. She is the director of the University of the Philippines Center for Women's and Gender Studies. Please welcome Dr. Nathalie Africa-Verceles.
Pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for making time, Natsi. Now, It's going to be interesting, actually, to have female gender experts take on, on the idea of toxic masculinity. So, Natsi, I'm going to jump straight into it. Set your table, so to speak, with your thoughts on what does society define as a successful man?
What a successful man is for society?
Yeah. Sure.
Well, it would somebody who would adhere to all those masculine norms. Yes, of dominance, competitiveness, aggressiveness, power, control.
Those qualities, are they good or bad? A little too much of anything becomes a bad thing? Where are you coming from when you enumerate those qualities? Surely there's some positive aspect to those.
Yeah, but I think the problem with adhering to idealized masculine norms, such as the demonstration of power and control, strength, competitiveness, assertiveness, it's so easy to cross over to the dark side of toxic masculinity. So I think we should really problematize these masculine norms that we ask all our men to adhere to. So that is something we should be talking about, I think.
Great. I love it. Okay, so we've got Meta's side, we've got Natsi's side, and we'd like to say hello to our third panelist now. Please welcome Gian Lao. Gian, glad you're here. If I can take this moment to introduce you, you are a poet, an essayist, you are a former speechwriter for President Aquino, and you recently wrote about how the school experience shapes masculinity. That's for the better or for the worse. It's lovely to have you with us, Gian. Now, how do you respond to Natsi's definition of a successful man, given what you've written about, given your experience? What are your thoughts to bounce off the idea of Natsi?
It's all true. I think the problem with it, with citing such universal values as, universally good things, is that you can kind of assign them to anything. Aggression can be good. Aggression can be good if you're like protecting someone or protecting people who don't have the privileges that you do, the protections that you do. But it's bad if you're using it to kind of assert dominance in someone, making someone feel small, hurting people. So it's kind of difficult to kind of put such universal labels on being a man, when it's so open to interpretation, and we're all interpreting it in every which way, and most of those ways are unhealthy.
Right. I really want this to be sort of a discussion between all four sides. Not that we're on opposing sides, and I'm definitely here to learn and looking forward to sort of leaving the talk richer in experience and in just an understanding of what it is. I'm a little bit confused myself. I'm no spring chicken, and I still haven't gotten it figured out. Meta, seeing as we introduced you first, I'm going to give you sort of, first shot here. And then I'd really like to just invite Natsi and Gian to just jump in at any point, if you'd like to add anything on or just react to anything. Let's go over some definitions of masculinity. Given your background, Meta, you're now quite a successful, like I said, poet, teacher. You work with underprivileged, young underprivileged people, but all of that comes from your background growing up, and all of those lessons that you learned the hard way. You already gave us sort of an idea of what you felt toxic masculinity was, but if we don't have that prefix on there, toxic masculinity, what does it mean to be a man then?
I think maybe, Paolo, it might be good to maybe give an anecdote of how my understanding of manhood got shaped. So back in Guam, I was born and raised. I was the bunso. I was the youngest in my family. I had an ate, I had a kuya. My kuya was 10 years older than me. My ate was 5 years, right? So there was a large gap between all of us. And so when I was a kid, I learned a lot from my ate, and she taught me a lot about to really kind of care for our family, right? And then at some point, that's in the Philippines, by the way. I'm in the green shirt. So I went, I always sort of had this softer side to me growing up, right? I was very malambing. If you look at that picture, even, I have my hand wrapped around a family member's knee, right? Like as a little boy, I was just very malambing growing up. I would always hug my family members. I would always kiss my mom, right? And at some point, all the boys in my neighborhood started teasing me about this, calling me weak and soft, boys don't do that, right? So very early on, I already started internalizing these ideas of oh, okay, I guess I'm supposed to not show emotion. I'm not supposed to show love and affection to my family members. And it transformed into to be a strong man means you don't cry, you show no weakness. And then my ate left for college, my kuya left to do his thing, and I was alone. I had no more role models, right? I had no one to guide me and teach me. And so I decided to start kind of hanging out with the boys in the neighborhood. And everything started out innocently enough. We were just hanging out, skateboarding, doing stuff like that. And very quickly, I found myself in very sort of destructive and self-destructive behaviors. Right? I was fighting a lot. I was just engaged in very self-destructive behaviors, right? Alcoholism, right? Drugs at a very young age, because these are the things that I learned made you a man. And yeah, it was just that's sort of what got instilled in my head, when previously what I thought being a good man, at least before all of this got internalized, was just being someone who can love people, right? And hold people up. But yeah, I think that's sort of what started to shape my idea of masculinity.
Paolo, I think we should go through some definitions, just to set the stage for the discussion. We should start with what masculinity is, I think. So masculinity would refer to practices, norms, behaviors that are associated with being a man. That's in opposition to femininity and being a woman. Okay, so this is socially constructed and learned. So when we say toxic masculinity, toxic is not a description of masculinity itself, but of, in particular, harmful male behavior, such as dominance, aggression, and violence, and of practices that oppress others, like other men, women, or LGBTQI individuals. So it does not assert that all men are bad or that men are naturally or essentially dominant, aggressive, or violent. So I think we have to be clear about what masculinity is and what toxic masculinity is in particular, because those are two different terms. We're not saying that everything masculine is necessarily toxic. Yes, but having said that, I think we should also, I mean, this is my assertion, I think we should look at men and masculinities from a critical perspective. So we don't talk about just men and masculinities as natural, but as located within unequal structures or systems of power and domination. So I think it's important that we understand that it's part of a larger schema of patriarchy, of male dominance and female subordination.
I suddenly feel all of my hackles relax. I was ready to fight with you there, Nancy, because now that we've cleared that up, and we've set that stage, masculinity is masculinity. Toxic masculinity is a totally different thing from masculinity, and you can't lump one with the other, and you can't just generalize either that all men are cavemen who don't know any better. But certainly, I think there's a certain aspect of evolution of becoming more. When Meta talked about how he learned, what it was to be a man. He'd start with terms like growing up. When I was young, are these things are? I assume these things are drilled into you, and these things come with experience, and you learn them, and it comes with maturity, and obviously, also in society, as society matures. Some people might take the view that it's maturing a little too slowly, but obviously I think there's a little bit more focus and attention on gender equality, on breaking these gender stereotypes, on what roles men traditionally are. And I'd also like to challenge Gian, jump in, back me up here, bro. I think the Philippines, although we keep saying we are a patriarchal society, I think the moms are actually very much in charge in terms of getting things done around here. And I'd like to sort of post that as a challenge. Gian, do you want to react to that? Do you feel that to a certain extent?
Yeah, absolutely. The thing, when I wrote that long article I did on all boys schools, I think the most important thing that I stumbled upon, when you write, you stumble upon these insights. And the most important one was, why is it so hard? Why is it so hard to reform just all boys schools? Well, that's because everyone has to change. Every single person in that system has to change, whether it's the principals, the teachers, the students, the parents. And one thing, about all boys schools is that they're not always just all boys schools. They're usually also all rich schools. And what that means is that the parents that teachers encounter, you might be a principal, you might be a teacher, you might be trying to institute reforms, you might be disciplining the boys for toxic behavior. Then you get a call from a parent, and they're influential, and they're economically influential, politically influential, and they start throwing their weight around. It happens. And I interviewed a bunch of administrators of these schools, and it really does happen. And that's why, I totally jumped there because you mentioned parenting. And part of parenting is, I guess, also, being able to, make that call. I've never been a parent. The parents in this call will probably be better, suited to answer this or to talk about this. But you really have to make the right calls, like a sequence of right calls when it comes to kind of raising someone right. And I just say this as someone who was raised and not someone who's raising someone. But yeah. I
don't know if I can agree with the Philippines being a matriarchy, but I do know that I can agree, Paolo, that mothers play such a large role in a child's life in the Philippines. Even in my life, my mom played such a major role. That's all I really wanted to just add to the discussion, really.
I wanted to say that parenting is important. So yes, we learn from our parents, but it's not only the family, that's the institution that socializes individuals. So you might be teaching them egalitarianism or equality in the house, but when they go outside, among their peers in the schools, everywhere else, it's different. See, but I agree. It's important though that at least you start in the home, because I did that with my children. Yeah. I'm probably among the panel members. I'm probably the only one with children. So I'll say that it does. I mean, I can vouch for it. It does help if you do start them very young and teach them very young, because then they're critical of what they see outside, and they don't buy into all these socially constructed, socially dictated norms on masculinity and even femininity, because I have a boy and a girl. See, so yes, I agree. Please be good parents. Start them very young.
Yeah, especially because when you Gian, it's also interesting you talked about the all boys school, because I think in education, right, like there's a hidden curriculum, right? There are things that we learn and internalize within the education system that aren't necessarily taught as part of lessons. And yet we learn these things too, like how to treat a boy, how to treat a girl. What does gender even mean, right? And yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there too.
Yeah, Meta, you mentioned that. I was literally about to say about the codes, like the ethics that we are exposed to, what is right and what is wrong. And what I wanted to say was that we usually paint with such a big brush. Like when I was growing up, what was bad? I learned that sexual harassment was bad and saying bad words was bad. And in my school, if you do one or the other, you might get similar degrees of punishment. So I do think that, the code of ethics that we're exposed to is also really important. We need to kind of be able to dive into it and talk about severity. And, maybe it's not good to always be cursing, but it's way different from, catcalling, objectifying people, bullying people. Those are way different offenses, but we see them as bad and good. So, and depending on the penalty that the schools impose on these offenses, that also shapes things. So that's another challenge for administrators.
Okay, since we're on the subject of starting them young and learning while you're young, I'm gonna sort of just steer us towards a couple of anecdotes from Meta. Meta, you grew up, like you said, we keep mentioning it, your experience growing up with your gang brothers. And it just led you down this path of classic toxic masculinity, which you at some point, decided to, or you just woke up from it and decided to make a change. I hope you can share a couple of. I hope you can share a couple of anecdotes with us about that. And Gian, maybe react to whatever Meta adds on there with your own reactions growing up as a young boy in an old boys school and how that shaped your ideas.
Oh, wow. It's a really long story, but I don't want to take up too much time. Essentially, I got jumped into the crew at around 14 years old, right? I was initiated at around 14 years old. 13 years old, somewhere around there. The reason I decided that was, again, because my ate and my kuya left. I had no role models. I didn't know who to look up to. And so I started hanging out with the homies in the neighborhood. And again, it started out innocently enough. We were just skateboarding. And then it became, hey, what can you steal from that store? And then it became, hey, drink this, down it. Then it became, hey, sell this for us, right? And then it became me fighting against other strangers for no apparent reason, other than I was told to do that. And I think for me, like, there were two sort of big moments for me realizing that I was caught in a self-destructive cycle. The first moment was, I remember we had just got into this extremely big fight. The cops came. They didn't arrest us, thankfully, because that could have gone totally different directions. But even as a young kid, like, I was pretty slick with, my words. And so I was like, yo, everyone be quiet. I'm going to talk to these cops and just be quiet. I'll get us out of this. And so at the end of it, the cop was like, I'm going to take you all home. Which at the time I was like, no, just throw us in the precinct because my mom, she's got the chinelas at home. No, it's not gonna be good. And so this first moment of waking for me was when the cop dropped me off to the house. We opened the front door. My mom answered, and the cop asked my mom, ma'am, is this your son? And my mom said, no, I don't know that boy. And she walked away crying in tears. And for the first time I had realized, oh my gosh, like I'm truly hurting someone I love deeply. So that was the first moment of waking for me. The second moment of waking was we were pretty much at war with another crew, and they decided to come down where we were at and do a drive-by shooting on us. And so I was standing next to one of the OGs who got shot, and he got clipped in the left arm. And I was standing right next to him, and I realized that had the shooter aimed even just a few inches left, I would have got shot in the chest. And like, I'm kind of a small guy now. Imagine me as a teenager. I was like tiny. And so I realized like, wow, I almost died tonight. And that was the true awakening for me, and me realizing like, wow, if I keep going down this path, there's a lot of things that could go really wrong for me. And I just had so many dreams and aspirations. And that's when I got more serious with my writing and performing, and decided to use writing as a vehicle to remove myself from such a toxic environment.
Yeah, I feel like the temptation when someone's asked to react to stories like this is to kind of find something similar. There's nothing similar, I guess, especially when you compare the struggle at home, but what I can say is that I do understand the motivations that might be instilled in someone in such a situation. For myself, that sense of belonging was also really important. Family, families are, you're born into them and you feel like you should belong in them and nothing can take you away from those families. But the moment you start, feeling like you're in a barkada or, a peer group that, it was of your own doing. I did something and they like me and I'm part of this. That feeling is addictive, and it still feels good when that happens. When I meet new friends and when I meet new people and they like me, it feels good. It's just that depending on social norms, how you're raised, the things that get you the respect and the belonging tend to differ. And what Meta said about the mom, saying that she couldn't recognize him anymore, it's really impactful. It hurt me like all the way here, through several thousand miles, because it hits. And I feel like it was impactful because it hits that sense of belonging. You thought you would always belong in your family, and you maybe it's something that I definitely took it for granted for a long time, and it's not surprising that Meta shares that it was a turning point because the things that you do for belonging suddenly led you to a situation where you stopped belonging to the most important kind of social group in your life. So, I guess that's how the angle from which I appreciated Meta's story.
Right. When we chatted before, you also, please,
no,
Nats.
Paolo, no, I was very interested in how Meta turned his life around, coming from, a background in being part of a gang. And it was that moment, it was your mother initially, Meta, yes? It was your mother really that was the turning point. And okay, I find that interesting because I think it's, how men are not supposed to feel, aren't the only feelings that you are allowed to feel is anger. Yes, you're not supposed to feel vulnerability, sadness, hurt, weakness, okay? But see, Meta was actually practicing something we would consider feminine, which was emotions. It was feeling. I feel that I hurt my mother. And that was key in you turning around your life. You see that? So that's why when we talk about toxic masculinity, we talk about men completely, throwing away everything that has to do with the feminine, with reason, not with emotion, with feelings. Yes, with being connected and nurturing and compassionate and kind. So that would be, I think, a way out of toxic masculinity. It's really, coming to terms with your full humanity, with what it means to be truly human. And unfortunately, that would mean practicing feminine qualities. I'm saying unfortunate because I'm sure men would not agree that they would like to be feminine in any way. Am I right? But that is what we would consider feminine. So yes, so to become less toxic, you have to be more feminine. There's no other way around it. Okay.
Great point there, Natsi. I think both Gian and both Meta have we, in our previous chat when we got to meet each other, they both talked about turning points, from a very dramatic arrest on Meta's part to this dawning of a realization of Gian, where he suddenly realized, oh my God, my sexy jokes and my dirty jokes, they just don't work in this day and age. Gian talked about that, and I'll give you a chance to jump back onto that story, Gian. But are men innately, are boys and men innately on a path to just toxicity? Do we need these moments where we have these epiphanies where we realize, oh my God, what am I doing? I need to turn my life around. I need to get with the program. I need to evolve. Gian, you want to tell us that story?
Turning points. I wouldn't call it a turning point per se. Like, how sonnets have these like turning points, like these lines where the entire story just turns around. And anyway, I'm not gonna talk about sonnets. But when I was 20, when I was in my teens, and in college, I like to think I was funny. I always had a sex joke for everything. Remember How I Met Your Mother? That's what she said. Turn everything into... No, that's not. Was that How I Met Your Mother? That's The Office or something. Anyway, that's what she said or whatever. You could turn everything into a sex joke, and it was the best. And I guess it was okay. People laughed. My peers laughed. Men, women, both laughed. Boys and girls. I don't think. But I think it was when I turned 23, 24, and I was working in an office in government actually. And I realized that the people who were coming in, fresh grads and it was their first job, and it was government, and they were very idealistic, and they didn't see me as a senior in college. I could have been in that office for like 10 years, and I was like, maybe, oh no, I'm kind of an old man, and the jokes just weren't okay. I guess when a peer tells you a joke like that, and you feel like you're in a similar I guess power level. You're just chewing gum or then talking about whatever, I don't know, but or just in the org room, just having a chat. But in the workplace, the seniority becomes a real thing, and I would tell I told a few sex jokes. Not pointed at all, but just kind of like jokes about sex. Haha, it's funny, the sounds you make or whatever. It's sweaty or whatever. And it just didn't hit, as well. And that's when I kind of noticed, well, okay, I guess it's not working anymore. And slowly, and I guess this is why, titos and dads always tell, make these puns or whatever. That's when I started, shifting my humor into into more, I don't know, may gout ka? Oh, pakilala ka sa gout kalinga. Like jokes like that. And I guess that's as close as you get, to a turning point in my story. I wouldn't say that, it was just one day I realized it and I changed, but it was more of also my friends educating me, me being, I guess it's not a surprise that, two of the panelists here are poets, me being into the humanities and prizing the ability to sense how people feel. And, you tell one or two jokes and you sense how people feel, you realize that you don't like that feeling. People like being liked, people like the feeling of, oh, they want me around. And if you're any good at sensing whatever, you'll realize very quickly that if you tell sex jokes, people don't want you around.
Times have changed. Listen, we're going before we jump in, Doc Natsi, I'm just going to take a message here or read out a message from one of our people who are joining our webinar. We've got something here from Ina Elorda. Wow, looking great topic, fantastic panelists. Hey, pat on the back for you guys. Looking forward to learning tonight. It's already been, it's just been a few short minutes, and we've already sort of covered a lot of ground. I'm trying to sort of put trying to organize our thoughts. Here's another question from the audience here. How can we steer away from, toxic masculinity in a school environment as a microcosm of a bigger society? Gian's probably got some points on this, where there are different individuals coming from different backgrounds and experiences. This is from Honorio Bucat. Thanks for joining us tonight. Natsi, why don't you jump in on this? And Gian, you can jump on this after Natsi.
How can we steer away? Okay. Before that, can I just make a comment about Gian's sharing? I've noticed that younger men are more empathetic, more open to progressive ideas than men from the boomer generation. So there's also that generational shift, I suppose, in terms of masculinity, because you know that masculinities are unstable. I mean, they're not fixed. They're also historically contingent and also context specific. So I think it's also good to remember that masculinities are not rigid. I mean, they differ between cultures, even within cultures. So I see hope in that sense, because if we have young, I'm assuming that they're young men like Gian and Meta, who are so quick to understand that toxic masculinity is harmful, to society, to other people, and even to themselves, and to willingly, make a change in their personal lives, interpersonal also, I'm assuming. So that is the way to go, I think. Okay, how do we change? The question was, how do we change toxic masculinity in schools? Yeah,
in the school setting. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, obviously, it has to start from the top. So your administrators should understand unequal gender relations, patriarchy. There should also be policies against sexual harassment and other forms of harm that can possibly be done to not just women, but also members of the LGBTQI community. So it's really establishing that culture of inclusivity, diversity, equality within the campus. And the administrators have a big role to play in setting this culture. Yeah, it should be institutionalized. Yeah.
Gian, this is your wheelhouse, brother. Hit us with those schoolboy stories.
No, it's hard because everyone, and as in every single piece of the puzzle, has to be a little better. You don't have to be a lot better. It'd be better if you were a lot better, but just being a little better helps. Principals can help, teachers can help, administrators can help, but also parents. Like I mentioned a while ago, parents. When you see your kids, doing something that's toxic, or if the teacher tells you something that the kid is doing that might be a little disturbing, then you need to take it seriously and you need to take steps to fix it. You can't just keep denying it and saying that, oh no, my boy would never do something like that, and that happens more often than we think. And honestly, the boys themselves have to be better. Okay, but I'll tell you one thing, and this is related to what Doc Natsi mentioned a while ago. I feel like as boys growing up in an all-boys school, we're kind of, let's say we have like this emotional spectrum, like a staircase of, for your emotional spectrum. The missing step is always like love and hurt and, basically all these more traditionally feminine aspects of it. And the thing is, when we see the media, we're still told that, love is this grand thing that we should aspire for. We should meet someone, and sex feels good, at least according to the media. I'm sure it feels, yeah. But but no one educates us on how to, find love and how to do it in a healthy way, or how to, when you're ready to engage in sex and to do it in a healthy way and in a consensual way. No one, like if you Google it, what do you get? You don't really get any classes. You don't get like a master class on how to find love or what a healthy relationship is. You get like pickup artist schools. And that's the problem. We don't want to institutionalize it. I don't know why, but we need to teach kids, what love is and how to love and how to express love in a proper way. I don't know exactly how to do. I'm not an educator, but it would have been great. It would have been great to have been taught, no, this is how you find love, and this is what a good relationship is.
Tell you who is an educator. We've got Meta here who works with young kids, young guys. And part of your backstory really is your realization pretty much is exactly what Gian is talking about. It's also what one of our attendees is talking about here from Harmony Guevara. She says, hi, your insights are really great. And I just want to share that perhaps we also have to guide men into seeing female attributed qualities, such as showing emotions and being caring, nurturing as strength, and as qualities that are not inclusive or exclusive, I should say, to women. Perfect statement there. Meta, this is exactly what this is your thesis. This is what you're talking about.
Yeah, 100%. So I kind of want to address both sides. I think back to the school question, if we're to believe that if we accept, which I agree, that schools are a microcosm of larger society, the answer is to either A, change society, which we know is, all right, or B, we shift the microcosm itself, right? We no longer, we try to make sure that schools aren't a microcosm of society, right? And so one actually very concrete example, I would like to advocate for the high school that I teach at. Many things are different in the high school that I teach at now, speaking as an educator. Dr. Natsi mentioned that it has to come from the top down, from your administrative level all the way down, right? And maybe even shifting the way we look at the hierarchy itself. Is it top down or is it within the circle, right? And so, for example, our interview process actually calls on our community. So if you want to work at this school, you're going to sit down with the students, you're going to sit down with the parents, you're going to sit down with the administrators, the curriculum designers. You literally sit down with the entire community. I don't know of many schools that do that because, again, schools are a microcosm of society, and in society, you interview with the boss, the hiring manager, and no one else, right? No other stakeholder has a say in who gets to work in these spaces. And so that's just one sort of concrete way that we can shift things, right, at the school level. And then I 100% agree with that. I don't know, I want to kind of tread lightly. I think that emotions and being caring and being nurturing, you're right, it's not necessarily exclusive to women, but I think historically these have been traits attached more to women or commonly to women. And I think for me, it's not that I don't like teaching boys that these are not exclusive to women. I think I would rather teach boys, okay, maybe these traits are naturally more feminine and that's okay, right? Like I would rather teach a balance of masculinity and femininity as opposed to erasing what it has been historically attached to begin with. I'm not sure if I'm making sense. Maybe Dr. Natsi, you could help me out with this explanation a little bit.
I know, yeah. Okay, Meta, I think I need to correct the assertion that women are naturally more emotional, more caring, more nurturing, and that men are naturally more dominant, aggressive. Remember, these are all social constructions. We are all enculturated and socialized into learning this behavior. So it's learned behavior. So if it's learned, it can be learned also by men. Okay, and I would be very careful about continuing to dichotomize masculinity and femininity. I have a very, very big problem with that. And I'll tell you why. The problem with dichotomizing is that when there's a dichotomy or a binary, you're setting those two as fundamentally different from each other. And there's always that danger that one will be dominant and the other will be subordinate. So if we maintain this masculine-feminine dichotomy, we would thereby be reproducing that gender binary and unequal gender relations, wherein what is culturally coded as masculine is valorized and what is culturally coded as feminine is devalued. Why can't we just give everyone the freedom right? To exhibit masculine, all these positive masculine and feminine traits without necessarily putting people in boxes. That if you're born male, you should adhere to these norms of masculinity. And if you're born female, you should adhere to these norms of femininity. Why can't we just be good humans, right? Why don't we adhere to norms of being good humans rather than classifying people into masculine and feminine in terms of how they should behave? I think we should talk like that. Meta, you should do that with your children, okay, with your kids in school. Okay, so
Yeah.
teach them.
I think for me, even I'm still kind of trying to wrap my mind around it, because what I'm hearing, and Dr. Nathalie, you can check me on it, is how do we, gosh, I don't know if this is the right terminology, but how do we ungender these qualities? Is that what I don't know if I'm understanding.
Yeah, I know. I perfectly understand what you're getting at. We don't have to ungender. It's just that we just don't dichotomize. We just teach people to be like this. Okay, be kind, be compassionate, be in touch with your emotions. Don't feel afraid to show emotion. It's not a sign of weakness. You know, just deconstruct all of these negative notions that are attached to feminine behavior, right? So you just teach them to be good people, right? Rather than this is how to be a good man or how to be a good woman, right? This is healthy masculinity or positive masculinity. Why don't we talk about healthy femininities? We only talk about positive masculinity, yes? Yeah. So there's nothing toxic about femininity. Is that the assertion? You see, can we just do away? I would just totally do away with putting people inside boxes. Yeah, Paolo, jump in, Paolo.
We're going to have another webinar on this. Yeah. The whole idea. This is just blowing my mind. I'm trying to keep up, taking notes here, and I know Meta and Gian's doing the same. And I mean, this is just going to be it's literally a mahaba-habang usapan. It's just this never-ending learning, and it's amazing. We've got a question here from the audience. As a woman, what's the best way to deal with men's toxic behavior? From Alisa Sobere. Thanks for that question. Doc Nazi, you want to jump on that?
I know her, Alisa.
Excuse me.
Yeah, it's Alisa, yes. I would call it out each and every time it happens, because I'm assuming that they all don't always know that they're behaving in a toxic way. You should call it out. You should not let it slide. Then that person would do the same to other people. Okay, so yeah. So, but always nicely. I always say that. So if you're going to call out someone, please do it nicely, because you don't want to antagonize the person. You want to win that person over to think the way you do, right? So if you do it in a combative way, then you would not actually be helping the situation. That person would just be aggressive, right? Or more aggressive. So that's the way I would do it. I would address it. I would not let it pass.
I definitely wouldn't let it pass either. I think call out is a good way to do it, but I think maybe the shift in terminology to call in. It's all semantics, but I just like the idea of like, okay, someone messed up, let's call them in and have this discussion, right? Because like you said, right, Dr. Natsi, like you want to win them over, you want to help them transform towards a positive direction. And so like, when your family messes up, you're like, oh, heliki dito, come sit, we need to talk, right? We need to talk.
Yeah.
As opposed to like call out culture and like cancel culture, which is to me ineffective. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll also chime in with just a question to both panelists, because not all toxic behavior is equal. Sometimes there is that power dynamic that you also have to manage, and I agree completely. Like if you have the capacity and the energy to call it out or call it in, then you should definitely do that. Like with me, you should definitely do it. Like if you ever encounter me in the street, I say something and just call me out. But some people don't also like react well to it. Some of them might be people in positions of power. They might, and that's also like, my question is, especially to Doc Natsi, how have you, I guess, navigated it? I'm sure there have been scenarios.
How would I do? Just to address Gian's question, I do. I don't shame people.
Okay.
Does that help? if it's somebody in a position of power. And any act of toxic masculinity is always a result of the assertion of power, Otherwise, that person would not, do perform in a toxic way. I would call it in because I know that call out has a negative connotation. I would really nicely explain and try to bring that person in rather than drive that person away. So there is a way. You can message the person, you don't have to go on social media and shame the person, right? Yeah. It helps, and I've done it. It works. It was actually quite effective.
You guys are right. You guys are right on where we're heading with this next question from the audience, and I think Meta was right on there. And I think we all have this Tito, we all have this Kuya who we just roll our eyes where they're like, oh my God, I can't believe he said that. Question from the audience: how do we call out toxic masculinity behavior, especially if they are our older or senior relatives? It's so hard to get into that. You can't just say, all right, Tito, Kuya, huddle. We got to talk this out. It's not always easy to do that. All of the panelists, please sound out on this one.
I can start us off. I'm going to say, first and foremost, this is a really good question because it's something I still struggle with. I don't think anyone has a silver bullet, so to speak, like the thing that solves the problem entirely. I just think nothing is ever solved even in just one go, I feel like. Right? Because there's so much to unlearn, but it has to start with honesty, right? And like Dr. Natsi was saying, maybe shame, although shame can be a powerful tool depending on who, but I do think that shame shuts people down and kind of just, there's a way to be honest without being shaming somebody. For me, sitting down and having a good bottle of San Mig together, you know what I'm saying? And just talking about things honestly, right? And just being honest and open about yo, that's problematic, right? Hey, what you just said is not cool. And use language will connect with this person, right? How I talk to a 13-year-old child is completely different from how I would talk to my Tito. Right. But a level of honesty needs to be established if you're going to address it. And you just got to be courageous enough to do it.
I think Meta is 100% correct. Just wanted to add on, I guess, that, it's why it's important also to be kind, because what I sense from older people is that there is that jealousy, that they never got, I guess, the opportunity that we have to truly express ourselves, because it was more rigid back in their day. The idea of what a man was more rigid, and there wasn't a Zoom webinar like this to tell them, to say that, hey, it's okay to feel this way, or to do these things, or to be a man, to kind of pursue this way of being a man. So there is that sense of jealousy, and why can you guys do it? And why was it when I was younger? This was never possible for me. So that's where I kind of dun ko hinuhugot yung malasakit dun sa tono ko pag nag-uusap kami.
All right. Well, let's jump to another question here from the audience. How can we change a system that is patriarchal in nature if the women or members of the LGBTQ community are continuously being deprived of their democratic rights, especially in educational institutions? A little bit of a political question here from Jonard Balidu. Doc Natsi?
Jonard, I'll just say, ang hirap ng tanong na yan. Kasi essentially the question is, how do we end patriarchy?
Yeah.
Right? But I'll just say, having conversations like this is one of the ways. We're still at that point where we need to continue to raise critical awareness about unequal gender relations, about unequal systems of power and domination, not only with respect to gender, but all other social identities, including class, race, ethnicity, disability, religion. sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, etc. So we're still at that stage. We need to continue to educate people. Okay, and I'll say this, I do training all the time, right? So on a cognitive level, I don't think it's difficult to sell the concept of equality. I mean, who would argue against equality? But this is what I try to do. So I try to touch not only their minds, but also their hearts. So I tell stories. That's what Martha Nussbaum, an American feminist philosopher, said. In order to really change the heart, we must tell a story. So that's what I do. So I talk about how harmful say toxic masculinity. I'll talk about how it harms people. Okay, not just again others, but also the men themselves. So that somehow will make them understand it on a more emotional level. And I hope that with the mind and the heart, that will lead to a change in their behavior, hopefully. But at least we're trying, right? So we need to continue to keep on doing this. Okay. And also in educational institutions, I'll tell you what we're doing in UP. We're doing gender sensitivity training with our top officials. See, so that's the way, because that's practicing what I just said earlier, that you need to make sure that your administrators are on board because they make the policies, right? So they need to understand what the advocacy is about.
All right. One of the things you mentioned, the term gender exclusivity, I don't know if I'm understanding it this way, but it triggered an interesting insight from Gian when we talked before. Gian, you talked about the realization that, when it comes to boys, the things that boys like, they're not mutually exclusive, or you don't have to take part and parcel toxic masculine behavior along with the other good things that come as part and parcel of being a guy. Real quick, give us that point you made before about being able to enjoy the things that make being a guy enjoyable without necessarily sort of being such an a-hole.
Well, I guess the funny thing is, the usual argument when we call people out for engaging in toxic behavior is that, oh my God, you guys are just too much. You're attacking boy culture. So my minor thought experiment was, what does boy culture look like without the toxicity? If we just remove catcalling and sexual harassment and objectification, if we stop rating women based on how they look, what does it look like? It's still very rich. It looks like video games, playing 2K with your friends, being super into LeBron. You can like cars, you can still like guns. All of these boy things are still there. Who's attacking boy culture, There's not much better in life, Paolo, than, really liking basketball and not being an a-hole, as you mentioned.
Right on. Now, I don't think we should let the opportunity pass when we have a performer like Meta on here. Meta, we've actually got an excerpt here from one of your works from the book Tie Your Shoes, Kid. We've got a short excerpt here. Brother, please treat us to a short reading of this passage here and just, walk us through it with the way that only you can.
Definitely. So it goes like this. Money was tighter than our fists clenched in a riot. Budgets cut like our lips in a street fight. Blood and failing are two things I'm very familiar with. So when I see Jeremy passed out, sleeping on a desk, I get angry because that's not what I meant when I said you need to dream. So I tell him, Jeremy, wake up. I know life's hard, but you can't crumple like paper. You don't belong in a trash bin. You're not someone else's garbage. Don't recycle your OG's histories. I got respect for your gang's flag, and I believe in the promise of brotherhood, but brothers should keep you safe, not dare you to rot in a prison cell. Wake up. But this is an excerpt from Watch Your Mouth, and the poem is both in my book, Tie Your Shoes, Kid, and on Button Poetry. Jeremy, right? He was a student. He was the spitting image of who I was when I was his exact age, kind of just caught in these self-destructive cycles, not really thinking about the future, hurting his mom, right? And so I felt like I needed to talk to this boy. And so I wrote this poem really for Jeremy, but really for all of the young boys out there who need to hear it. who think there's nothing beyond what's in front of them.
I'm going to give Doc Natsi and Gian a chance for their last word. I want to leave the audience with that memory of you, because that was awesome, Meta. But Doc Natsi and Gian, if we've talked about, and tried to sort of put our finger on the idea of what toxic masculinity is and why it doesn't belong and why we need to change that, how do we then define what it is to be a good man? How do we go about being a good man? I'll give you just a real quick, couple of sentences. If you could just sort of give it to us. How do we, from this point on, move forward towards being better men?
I'll just say, Gian, I love LeBron. Does that make me masculine? Okay. Okay. Maybe you want to stop thinking about masculinity, or healthy, positive, transformative masculinity, because really it's just the adoption of feminine characteristics, right? Why can't we just call it that? So I want to end with this. Any consideration of toxic masculinity must not detract from a more thorough understanding of the systemic nature of patriarchy. That's the system of male dominance and female subordination, because there's a danger in individualizing acts and laying the blame only on specific men, the toxic men, rather than on unequal gender structures that should be dismantled. So it's not only toxic masculinity, which we should be problematizing, but also sexism. So men are sexist in many ways that might not be considered outright toxic, but that is no less harmful. So we should really transform practices that reproduce male dominance and female subordination. So this requires changes in the personal, interpersonal, institutional, and also ideological levels. So I hope all of us will work together for a better world where there is no one who has to be confined as a result of rigid dictates in terms of how we should be because of our sex assigned at birth. Yeah, so that's we should all have the freedom to be who we want to be and who we are.
I just ran out of paper for all those great ideas. All those great ideas there, Doc. Thank you so much for that closing statement there. Gian, I'm going to give you the last touch on this one. Just so it's out there, I'm not a LeBron fan myself. I don't even like basketball, but we can still be friends, right? We can still be bros. But go ahead and just sort of try to distill the experience. And I think Doc Natsi is you're already like one or two steps ahead of where we're at. And I think we all want to move forward and move higher and to a higher and higher sense of understanding of these things. And I think when we become more conscious of what we need to be watching out for, then those doors open. Gian, pick up on that and take us home.
Yeah. Well, number one is we need not just one webinar, we need like 500 webinars.
Right on.
Because this is what it looks like, Paolo. I'm sure you have your own group chats, like, all these boy group chats. What it looks like there is that, if you're too awoke, or if you always try to do the right thing, that becomes your reputation. And, they pick on you because magagalit si Gian, hala. And magagalit si Rob. Sorry, hi Rob. If you're too woke. And the reality is that we need 500 conversations to really hammer it in, what's acceptable and what's not, what's good to do and what's not. You're not going to win. You're not going to win with one webinar. You're not going to win the conversation at the end of it. You're not going to win after your Christmas reunion where you confronted your tito finally. There's no winning, until you do it so many times that they just accept it, that, that's your morality and that's everyone's morality. And we need to be better. And that then, slowly they get better.
Good point. Excellently put. And I'm right with you there. I mean, one webinar, what are we talking about here? We've just barely scratched the surface. I think this really does open the door to so much more discussion. We've got so many messages here from our attendees. Thank you so much. I really do apologize that we couldn't attend to all of your questions. We've got them on there. We're going to tell you what, I'm going to throw them to our panelists if they want to address them offline and just sort of keep the momentum going. please be my guest. I'm going to pass these questions on to you guys. We've got some great questions here from everybody who attended. With that, I want to say thank you so much for sharing your insights. After hearing all of you share your experience, I feel I'm going to sleep smarter tonight. I'm going to be sleeping a better man, so to speak. I think I said it earlier. I think we all want to move towards a higher sense of understanding, a higher plane of consciousness, and just be better men. And we just need to just sort of help each other, point each other in the right way, and just keep those ideas flowing. And this is really just the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. Thank you to our viewers. Thank you so much for joining us in this mahaba-habang usapan, brought to you by CNN Philippines in partnership with Sunmig Light. This episode will also be uploaded on Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify, so please do watch out for that. I'd like to say thank you so much to Gian, Doc Nazi, and of course, Meta. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. This conversation could have gone on forever, but like you said, maybe we can organize another one. This has been your host, Paolo Abrera. Goodbye and stay safe, everyone. Thank you so much.